Welcome. Welcome, everybody. So we are starting for this new panel with some questions. And also, we remark something that has been said in the previous panels. We are halfway through the 2030 agenda approved in 2015, and we have to remark that with respect to several of the 17 SDGs, we are off track. So, one of the topics of our discussion today could be, can AI be used to scale up the UN 2030 agenda? And if AI can serve in that sense, what is the role of the UN to prevent it from becoming an instrument of digital authoritarianism? In fact, we are now at a second step of AI, that is a generative system that reshapes the idea we have of human as the only agent of the ecosystem. Now we are definitively understood, realize, we are conscious that there are autonomous agents, autonomous artificial AI agents that operate with us humans. That's what the Italian philosopher Luciano Floridi from Oxford University, now in Yale, said in his Fourth Revolution book and studies of humanity. He said, we are at the step where man is not at the center as it was before, but relationships are at the center. So relationships among humans and all the other species, and humans and all what is connected in the world that he called infosphere. I am a journalist of Rai Public Italian TV, and as journalist I have the opportunity, and I had in the last week, to meet some of the leading actors of private and public sector. So last week, the two that I met gave me some insights. That was, for example, about building a personalized AI for each of us. It was Reid Hoffman, who left the board of OpenAI, and he's starting a new startup that is called Inflection AI. So Inflection AI is a sort of toolbox for our pocket, and he will build it himself, not with the public, of course. The other one is a man who worked in public in many sectors. This is Leon Panetta, and on his side, he admits that AI could get out of hands of governments. So we are at the moment where a public-private system, a place of discussion like this today, is not only necessary, but essential. What we told in the first years, in the first decades of technology, also as journalists, we used to say that each technology is neutral and we can use for the good or for the bad. This is not true anymore. According always to the philosopher Luciano Floridi, we are at a point where we have to have it good, and if we can use this word moral, by design. Here we come to our panel that is looking ahead to WSIS Plus 20, accelerating multi-stakeholder process. And I introduce our esteemed and distinguished panelists to discuss with them on these topics. So, Doreen Bogdan Martin, Secretary General, International Telecommunication Union. Yu Murai, Distinguished Professor, Keio University. Tripti Sinha, Chairman, ICANN Board. Sir John Whittingdale, Minister for Data and Digital Infrastructure, United Kingdom. Maria Fernanda Garza, Chair Oresti and Board Chair, International Chamber of Commerce. Sigborn Geisvik, Minister of Local Government and Regional Development, Norway. Chad Garcia Ramillo, Executive Director, Association for Progressive Communication. Welcome, everybody. And let's start with our first question. That is, what have been the key success of WSIS in the last 2 decades, and how has its multi-stakeholder nature contributed to them?
Thank you, Barbara, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to see so many friends of WSIS in the room and friends of IGF. Maybe if I could just ask, how many of you were at the WSIS in 2003? 2005? Oh, me too. I mean, I think in part to come to the answer about the key successes of WSIS, it's kind of the commitment of people here, the commitment of people online, and of course the inclusive nature in the run-up to the WSIS 2003. You know, I think in many ways the WSIS was actually ahead of its times, developing a comprehensive framework that's still absolutely valid today, even when we look at new things like generative AI. And of course, the WSIS was perhaps the most inclusive consultative process in the run-up to 2003, 2005, including governments, the private sector, civil society, academia, UN institutions. And I think we can't forget that multi-stakeholder process and the resulting outcomes in 2003 and 2005 are still strong. And I think we certainly can't forget that. And when it comes to that sort of community spirit and the successes we've seen with many of our WSIS prize holders, that grassroots exchange of incredible things that have since blossomed and scaled, I think is also something we can be quite proud of.
Thank you. You, Murai, which is your impression on this? Okay,
you know, I mean, your question is about 2 decades, right? Which is 2003, I believe, that WSIS started this discussion. So, you know, looking at those years, year 2000, for example, only 6% of the human being accessing the internet at that time. Now it's more than 70%, I believe. Yeah, 67. I'm sorry. Thank you. And therefore, it's from 6% to 70% dropout, right? So that's a great speed of deployment of the internet, and then therefore it's a lot of universal access to the computer network, digital data. You mentioned about AI, and the AI is based on those infrastructure. And therefore, that's a great success that without the open forum like IGF, it's never achieved on the human being to cover that kind of thing. That's one. And the second question about how that multi-stakeholder works, and then from 6% to 70%. And then the coverage of the participation of that space is, when we developed the internet, then the internet was for us. I mean, for ourselves, but it's for everyone, right? And therefore, the stakeholders are increasing the different diversity types of stakeholders being involved on this technical environment, which is only could be achieved by a multi-stakeholder model about discussion or process or anything. Therefore, those are the 2 key successes of WSIS.
Thank you. Maria Garcia.
Can you hear me? Okay. Well, thank you very much for having me here, and I'm delighted to answer this question. So, in terms of what has happened since the 2003, I would say the last 2 decades bear witness. Just look at the amazing transformation that has impacted the global population. Whether you look at the scope and scale of the internet and its reach today, and you've got over 5 billion people on the internet today, and billions of devices. This has all happened in the last 20 years. When you look at what's happened in terms of consumer technologies, smartphones, and all of that was developed in the last 20 years. AI is a product that happened less than a year ago. All this is because of what the multi-stakeholder community, having multiple voices at the table, which allows us to create open standards and open architecture, interoperability. So all of this has made quite an impact and has been a product of bringing this multi-stakeholder community under the information society. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gelsvik?
Can I, first of all, thank you for your
Yes.
invitation to join you this afternoon and to thank our Japanese hosts. I mean, it is reassuring that I agree with my 3 colleagues who have already spoken. Extraordinary change within the last 20 years. In 2003, the internet was in its infancy. The speeds we were talking about then were a fraction of those now available, and the reach of the internet was nothing like what it is today. And today, the internet is a part of our lives. My children have grown up in a world where they've never not known having the facility of the internet. But there are great challenges ahead, and that means that the principles that were laid down in the first WSIS in 2003, it is a tremendous tribute, but actually they remain as valid today as they did then. And so, as my colleagues have said, the multi-stakeholder approach, the fact that we can draw upon the knowledge, experience, and advice of companies, business, civil society, as well as governments, that has been of fundamental importance in the development of the internet. And that then led to the development of this Internet Governance Forum, and we see that as being as important today, if not more so, and therefore we need to build upon the work that's been made, particularly the action lines that were set out as we move forward, because there is no doubt that those principles are still essential if the internet is to develop in the way that all of us want to see.
Thank you. Mr. Kelsey?
Well, thank you so much. And first, I would like to thank you for the kind invitation to participate in this important panel. And I also wish to convey huge thanks to the Japanese government for hosting this important forum. One of the critical successes for WSIS has been the changing of the narrative. It was the first ever clear statement of political will to establish a human-centric, digitally connected global society. The focus was on using ICT to support development objectives. At the same time, WSIS has played a role in developing policy frameworks and guidelines for the responsibly inclusive use of ICTs. With the creation of a solid and committed multi-stakeholder community through the WSIS Forum, one has managed to increase the focus on leveraging technology to achieve the goals of the WSIS. And many of the WSIS community are also active here in the IGF. And this dynamic commitment has allowed continued dialogue and engagement. At the same time, the UN system has used the WSIS Foundation to create a strong collaborative network with the WSIS co-chairs of the ITU, UNDP, and UNESCO and UNCTAD, working to strengthen the collaboration and synergy.
Thank you. Chat Garcia, Ramilo.
Thank you, and hello to everyone who in the room. I think I want to highlight 2 things. The WSIS was the foundation of global policy on the digital society. At that time, it was information society. I agree that, you know, the spread of issues covered by the Geneva Plan of Action, what we're calling the 10 action lines, encourage really a systemic approach to integrating digital technologies into different sectors and disciplines. This in turn created opportunities for diversity in approaches and participation of stakeholders, particularly for civil society. I mean, I remember that time in 2003 and 2005, there was real hope, there was energy, and there was belief in the information society. So there were a lot of participation from different groups focused on enabling people-centered and human rights-based policy environments, meaningful access for communities in rural areas. The other thing I think that that is true here is the multi-stakeholder principle, and that everyone has talked about. The principles of participation defined by WSIS and their practice, especially through IGF, have contributed to an acknowledgement that partnership, only through partnership and collaboration, can we make more effective implementation. And I think that's true today. Although I want to mention a caveat here. I think these principles are not applied equally everywhere. And I think that's something that we need to pay attention to. There are disparities in applying the multi-stakeholder approach. Not to say that it's not important, but we need to improve that. And we need to remember that there are dynamics of power, there are conflicts of interest, and there are real difficulties in reaching consensus. So we need to really reinvigorate our commitment to the multi-stakeholder process and to consensus building. But we've learned a lot from WSIS and IGF. We have learned that meaningful and democratic multi-stakeholder participation needs to be consistently inclusive at all levels, from national, from regional, from international level. And I think that's the lesson that we've learned and the success. And we have a lot to draw from in the next 2 years, 5 years from now. Thanks.
Thank you for your answers. And what have been the main challenges confronting with this process? What plans should be in place to address them ahead of the WSIS Plus 20 milestone? Tristina.
Thank you for the question. So I would say one of the challenges that we face is conflation in understanding where the problem exists in terms of addressing problems. So there is well-intentioned regulation and legislation underway that is oftentimes targeting the wrong layer of the internet. So the underpinnings and the technical infrastructure of the internet is apolitical and should continue to operate. It is indeed a common good infrastructure for the entire globe, and upon it sits the application layer. So I believe one of the challenges is that there are problems that we're trying to address which occur at the application layer, and we're looking at the underpinnings of the technical infrastructure. So that would be one issue that I believe that we need to, a challenge that we are addressing. Another is that with this attention now on governance, which is important, that we ensure that the internet governance model continues to remain sound with multi-stakeholderism at play, that we don't forget that it needs to continue to grow, and we stimulate the growth of the internet with all the other innovations that are at play. As well as there's a conversation underway that is multi-stakeholderism working or not, and is multilateralism an option? My concern there is you would leave many, many voices behind if you went in that direction. Multi-stakeholderism is the only model that brings all different voices to the table, different sectors of society, which essentially breeds best of breed solutions. It yields that kind of an environment. So that is one of my concerns, is that we really have to look at our successes of the last 20 years and how this has worked well in our to serve the internet. So, thank you.
Thank you. Maria Fernanda Garza, so which is your idea of the address that the plans should go ahead?
Thank you very much. First, let me tell you the International Chamber of Commerce is the institutional representative of 45 million businesses in over 170 countries. And ICC was a focal point for business input since the WISES in 2003-2005, and continues to observe and provide input on behalf of the global business in the WISES follow-up processes, which started 20 years ago and set forward a vision to enable and uphold a global and people-centric information society. The outputs from this process, the Tunis Agenda and the Geneva Action Plan, focus on creating a truly global internet where everyone can benefit from what it has to offer. We have shared a responsibility in shaping this inclusive information society jointly, cooperating across the stakeholders groups, and our great challenges still remains. While incredible progress has already been made, 2.6 billion users still remain unconnected, and those who have the possibility to connect often do not, for a variety of reasons, from affordability to lack of services or skills, cultural and normative impediments. And once online, a whole host of other challenges arise. The world around us has evolved significantly since 2003, with new challenges on the governance and the internet leading to fragmented policy responses, also influenced by the evolution of digital technologies based on or beyond the internet. While the multi-stakeholder model has long a very long way, it is still not universal, and it is not leveraged properly in all levels of governance. We need to reinforce the model and make it the rule, not the exception, in how we address the policy, the regulatory, and legal space around the internet and digital technologies more broadly.
Thank you. And Chat Garcia Ramilo?
Thank you. I think I want to add to the 2.6 billion still unconnected. I think that is one of the biggest challenge we have, is the persistent digital inequality and exclusion. And I think this is based on the assumption that digital technologies can enable economic growth, and that economic growth equals development. I think that is, if we do not look at the how the context, I think we will look at this in a simplistic way. Digital inclusion of communities for the sole purpose of feeding the market logic worsens inequality, it worsens oppression and inequity, and it adds to the environmental crisis as consumption increases. And I think that's a challenge for us all. Unless people have meaningful connectivity, investment in digitalization will simply not provide benefit across classes, gender, and regions needed for sustainable development. And we do need to connect WSIS with the sustainable development. I think the other point is the alignment of private and public interests. The WSIS goal of being people-centered needs to be at the fore of any digitalization effort. In 2005, on the eve of the Tunis summit, APC called for ensuring universal and affordable internet access. We argued then that the internet is a global space that should be open and accessible to all on a non-discriminatory basis and must be governed as a global public good. In this review of WSIS plus 20, I think there's a need to call for greater recognition of the internet and digital technologies as a global public resource, and that their governance should definitely be grounded in international human rights standards and public interest principles. This recognition needs to be backed by mechanisms that enforce corporate accountability, effective governance of global data public goods, and financing for public digital infrastructure. Lastly, I think this also behooves governments to reconsider restrictive regulatory options and avoid criminalization that reinforce their hold on power, that cause harm to individual citizens during times of crisis, and in fact, impacts negatively on public services. We need to draw on the potential of digital technologies for creating more open and inclusive societies and economies.
Thank you. And Dorigbo, Dan Martin, so what have been the main challenge and what we are going to face?
Thank you. You know, looking back, I guess I would say there are some, let's say, unforeseen advances that we perhaps didn't predict back then. Of course, if we look at 2003 and 2005, we're talking about a sort of pre-social media world. No Facebook, no Twitter, no Instagram. And so I think the concerns, the growing concerns that we see today when it comes to misinformation, disinformation, I don't think we expected that back then. Of course, the rapid pace of technology is something else. You mentioned generative AI before. That's something that policymakers, regulators, intergovernmental institutions, we all struggle to keep up with. But I do think that the WSIS framework still provides the right elements to have this, this discussion. I would also say cybersecurity, it was definitely there back in 2003, 2005, but also I don't think we could have predicted how widespread and how much cybersecurity would grow as a concern. I think it's year on year, 80% in terms of cyber attacks growth. That's kind of scary. So that's something we should think about and perhaps double down as we look at WSIS plus 20. The digital divide, many have mentioned. We've made great progress in narrowing the gap, but of course the third of humanity that is still not connected is a big concern, and we do have to keep in mind that we have covered the planet more or less in terms of 3G, 4G coverage, but we still have this challenge of getting the unconnected connected, and I think we have to certainly address that. I think it's also important when we look at challenges, to look back at the targets that we set and try to understand why we didn't meet them. Let's take connecting schools. We were actually supposed to connect every school on the planet by 2015. That didn't happen. So looking back at those targets, I think as we look to the future in the WSIS plus 20 process, as we look to the Global Digital Compact, and I recognize our two co-facilitators that are with us, we have to figure out why certain things didn't happen and dive deep on those pieces to try to find ways to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, cybersecurity is one of the most important problems we have, and with quantum, it could change in a few years again. So, Sir John Whittingdale.
Thank you. I would agree. I think digital inclusion is of crucial importance and one of the great challenges that we face, because as more and more developing countries adopt the technology of the internet, firstly, we need to make the case that the governance structure that we have put in place is the best way of ensuring the effective development of the internet. But perhaps by demonstrating to them also the huge benefits which digital technology can bring to development. And perhaps one of the ways we can do that is by linking the action lines which were developed in the original WSIS process to the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. And by illustrating things like, as you have just said, connectivity in primary schools, bringing the benefits to all pupils of connection, and at the same time through healthcare. So more and more can be done online through diagnosis and indeed treatment via online healthcare provision. So these are real benefits, and if we make sure that the development of our own principles mirrors that of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, then that is something that I think will ensure that the whole world benefits from this technology.
Thank you. So now let's go to the future and try to understand how can and should WSIS evolve to address the complexity and speed of AI and AI-related technology, as we mentioned before, for example, quantum for cybersecurity, or what's happening with the personalized AI that is even go ahead from generative AI. Yoon.
Okay. All right, thank you. Let me propose a kind of two ways of thinking about the AI and the AI-related technologies and probably the use. So the AI technology itself and the AI-related technology, those are the technologies to be kind of impacting for the future of our society very much, and we are expecting a lot of things, and your question include the complex AI technology. Yes, those technologies are pretty much complex, and difficult sometimes to understand how it works type of a thing, and what's going to be a requirement to the infrastructural technology to support the AI services. So in that sense, it's a really important, I think, for the process like WCSIS that about the transparency, openness, about the development of the technology. Because if technology is going to be a kind of a closed and kind of a black box, that's going to be a very dangerous situation. Therefore, in order to achieve that kind of openness and the transparency, then technological, international, global standard efforts going to be very important. That's about the technology, AI technology, and AI-related technology as well. And another thing is that about the use and the application of the AI. So when the AI is impacting their services on the society, then everybody started to talk about the kind of, but this is AI, and then taking my job, or whatever the negative impact of the use of that technology, which is a very dangerous situation unless open and the multi-stakeholder discussion would be achieved. So in that sense, WCSIS is very important to address that kind of issue.
Maria Fernanda Garza, so which can be the new challenge and where to address WSIS in the complexity of our world?
WSIS is not a technology specific, nor it's limited to any one technology that was at top of mind then or might be top of mind now. Instead, WSIS set out a uniform vision and offer us a toolbox to cope with the challenges of technology, while giving everyone the opportunity to share in the enormous benefits it offers. It encouraged international cooperation, multi-stakeholder collaboration, as well as an open dialogue and exchange of views and best practices. While almost 20 years have passed since this toolbox was created, and new challenges have surfaced, the most important questions we should be asking ourselves is whether we have been using it effectively. The multi-stakeholder model is our most useful and versatile tool in this box. We also must approach solutions in a way that they don't fragment the policy space that we work in together. Rather than duplicating efforts or centralizing processes, we should be leverage existing resources and ensure that our approaches are compatible and interoperable with one another. To bring just one example, multi-stakeholders conversations on AI help the development of the OECD trustworthy AI principles. At the same time, the private sector continues to dedicate its expertise to develop responsible AI supported through standards built by the technical community, academic research, and grassroots efforts from civil society to ensure accountability and build capacity. And there are many more initiatives, whether national, intergovernmental, private sector-led, or multi-stakeholder-led. Bringing all of these pieces together is why WSIS created the IGF, to promote interoperability across of different approaches and areas, allowing them to come together and enhance and inform one another.
Thank you. Mr. Sigbjørn Gelsvik.
Thank you so much. Emerging technologies such as AI will solve problems better and allow us to solve problems in entirely new ways. At the same time, AI brings significant challenges and ethical dilemmas that we must take seriously. WSIS has already engaged in dialogues and workshops to manage artificial intelligence. WSIS should further incorporate AI and AI-related topics into the WSIS agenda. The human-centric focus from WSIS will be an important addition to the current international debates on AI. As WSIS advocates that these technologies should amplify rights, not limit them. The importance of involving the multi-stakeholder aspects becomes more critical in discussing AI technology. Through the dynamic commitment between the WSIS Forum and the IGF, we can spread awareness, increase AI literacy and skills development, and understand its ethical and societal implementations. We also need greater involvement of technical experts and researchers. As AI continues to shape the digital landscape, their experience can provide valuable insights and guidance.
Thank you. And Ms. Doreen Bogdan-Martin, so you said very well what's the past, so what have we look for in the future?
Thank you. As I mentioned before, I do think that WSIS was ahead of its time. And I think that framework is still very, very valid, and we can draw from it. You know, I think when we look back, some of those core elements that we're discussing today in the context of AI, things like ethics that's built into to the WSIS framework, security, of course, C5, for those of you that follow the action lines, misinformation, that was also there, and also important things like enabling frameworks, capacity development. And I think we have to build on those elements as we look forward. Back in 2003, when world leaders adopted the Geneva outcomes, it did say very clearly that the outcome was going to be evolving, that the WSIS process, WSIS was going to be an evolving platform. And so I think it's important that we maintain the inclusive nature, that we continue to build on this robust multi-stakeholder process. I think that's fundamental. And something that we have done for next year is actually take our WSIS forum that we do together with UNDP, UNCTAD, UNESCO, and other UN partners, and we have intentionally placed it back to back with our AI for Good Summit, which brings together some 40 UN agencies. And bringing those two audiences together, I think will also help us as we look forward to the WSIS Plus 20 process that will conclude in 2025. And of course, the events next year will take place prior to the Summit of the Futures, the Global Digital Compact, which we think can also help be a springboard as we look forward to 2025. Thank you.
Thank you. So the IGF is one of the major outcomes of WSIS. What do you see as its role and special value within the WSIS framework? Mr. Sigbjørn Gjedvik.
Well, thank you again. The IGF has provided an appropriate platform for stakeholders from various sectors and regions to collaborate. The role of the IGF is a facilitator and a forum for important discussions for governments, civil society, the academic sector, the technical community, and the private sector. Its inclusive approach aligns with the WSIS principle of involving all stakeholders in shaping the digital future. The fundamental principles of WSIS include us promoting an open, inclusive, and human-centric information society. IGF helps translate these principles into practical discussions and actions. The IGF operates informally and does not produce binding decisions or regulations. This allows for more open discussions and knowledge sharing without the constraints and complexity of formal negotiations.
Thank you. Maria Fernanda Garza, so which is, in your opinion, IGF role?
Thank you. As we all have been mentioning, the IGF is an invaluable in its ability to bring together all stakeholders, communities, to share their knowledge and expertise to ensure interoperable policy approaches that meet the diverse needs of everyone, everywhere. What truly distinguishes the IGF, it is its role as a convener. It acts as a nexus of all different communities, of the internet and the global digital economy, and it's a powerful attribute that sets it apart thanks to its unique bottom-up model. And as you know, I am also a member of the IGF leadership panel, and together with my colleagues in the panel, we believe that this unique power of the IGF should be harnessed for policy-making processes at the international level as a sounding board or in an advisory capacity. As members of the leadership panel, our commitment extends to ensuring the IGF is known and recognized across different policy-making spaces. Our role is to act as a bridge between those different policy-making bodies and lift the IGF outcomes to the highest levels of policy. As we look at front of the WSIS 20 review and the deliberations of the Global Digital Compact, we envision the IGF to become a forum to contribute substantially to the development of those processes and their outcomes, and also remains engaged in their follow-up.
Thank you. Sir John Whittingdale.
Thank you. The IGF has played a central part in the development of the governance of the internet, and we think it essential that it should continue to play that role post-2025. I am a government minister, and therefore I obviously recognize that there is a role for governments to play in this, but equally we recognize that those who are responsible for the development of this technology, which is primarily business, have to have a voice too, as do the users, the beneficiaries of the internet, and they are represented by civil society. And it's for that reason that we see the drawing together of all three of these component parts in the overall development of the structure as being so important. And we also want to make sure that we continue to evolve all the other subsidiary parts. So that is the fora connected with national administrations, regional, and also very much to continue to hear the voice of youth. And I welcome the role played by the International Internet Youth Governance Forum. And it needs still to be inclusive as well, so that all the different stakeholders can come together and share their experience and talk about the challenges. So we remain a very strong supporter of the IGF concept, and we will continue to hope that it continues to play the role that it has developed so successfully in the coming years.
Thank you. Ms. Tripti Sinha.
Thank you. At the risk of sounding repetitive, I couldn't agree more with what has just been said. Inherent in the IGF is its commitment to multi-stakeholderism and bringing various and sundry opinions to the table. A solution typically breeds a good outcome when it is weighed in on by various multi-stakeholders, and that is indeed what the IGF provides, a forum for just about every segment of society to come together and produce a good outcome. Technologies are built for people, and they bring value to people, and you need to then wrap it within policies so that they perform and operate well for society. So the IGF provides that forum, and I would like to say that ICANN is very much committed to the IGF, and that our participation here shows that we are firmly behind it. And I'm not sure that there's any other way to evolve a technology that spans for this entire 8 billion human population that we have today. So indeed, I just concur and agree with what my colleagues have just said. And the future is young. The future is for today's youth. And as Sir John was just saying, I 100% agree with what your points on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Yu Murai.
Okay, that's a very important question, like kind of value of the IGF and from with this discussion. And you know, the year 2007 was when the smartphone was invented, right, onto the market. And then so when we imagine the kind of value of the internet and its environment, then without smartphone, after smartphone, that's a big difference, right? And so impact going to be different, and also the industries and the stakeholders to be involved on this process has been largely changed. Therefore, the principle, like kind of openness and the multi-stakeholder, those are very, very important, right? And then we discussed already about about 70% of the human being on the accessing the internet. But then what about the 30% more? I mean, in order to reach to truly everybody accessing the internet, and then that's a very much important principle about inclusiveness, right? Inclusion. Internet inclusion type of a discussion is going to be very important, but therefore the principle is important. And the last thing I want to address was when we started to discuss what's going to be a critical infrastructure of a human being, and then so it's like a water, it's like the oxygen, of course, and then the environment, other environmental issue, climate change. And those are the, and then technology is providing a critical infrastructure to this society. And what about the internet? Internet is a computer network and the storage and the electricity. Those are basically the digital infrastructure of us today. And so those are getting to the, because of the recent change, rapid change of the world environment and everything, but then the internet becoming very much a critical infrastructure for lifeline for all the human beings. Therefore, those human rights discussion and the principle is going to be also having a very special value, especially today.
Ms. Chat Garcia Ramilo?
Yeah, what is there left to say about the value of the Internet Governance Forum? We're all here, we've experienced the IGF. What I want to say is that it works, and its mandate should be strengthened and renewed after 2025. I think that is important. But it's not only the global forum, there's a lot of other regional and national forums associated, the intersessional forums, mechanisms, etc. So it is actually quite a sophisticated and really broad process. And we can participate at different levels. And I do think that the IGF has nurtured thinking and practice around the WSIS action lines. There's also the IGF dynamic coalitions. And in our experience in APC, we participated in many of these, from gender to community connectivity, net neutrality. And these have been important in our thinking because we talk to other stakeholders. And that really helps build trust, that helps us look at other perspectives, and in the end, be part of the decisions and the policy making. So I think that just bear witness about how important this forum has been. So let me just tell you then one story that relates to WSIS in 2003. So 20 years ago, at the negotiations of the Tunis agenda, the gender paragraph was in danger of being struck out. It was paragraph 23. I still remember this. A handful of us feminists campaigned to keep it in. We literally wore the paragraph on our backs, printed on our T-shirts. Now, this gender commitment, paragraph 23 of the Tunis commitment, has morphed into a shared call for addressing gender across all WSIS action lines. In a sense, it's become like, IGF is a multi-stakeholder forum. It's important. Now, everybody is calling for gender equality to be integrated across all the issues. Yesterday, here at the IGF, -1, we sat down with civil society, states, tech community, and UN agencies to adopt the feminist principles for including gender in the Global Digital Compact. So this is, I think, this is how we're able to really make use of the space, to broaden the agenda and to really bring change. So again, the IGF works. So here at IGF in Kyoto, we are launching a campaign as a contribution. It's the IGF We Want campaign to highlight IGF's impressive track record as a central space for multi-stakeholder engagement. Please look at our website and just tell us what is it that we want in IGF. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Doreen Bagdan-Martin.
Thank you. I think there's consensus up here on the importance of IGF and the need to strengthen it. So I don't want to repeat what previous speakers have said, but simply to say the ITU is a strong supporter of the IGF. We've been a partner since the very beginning. We look forward to continuing to support it. Chad, I'm glad you brought up the digital gender gap piece, because that's something when we talk about the online, that's a gap that just doesn't shrink. So we need to really, I think, zoom in here and in other fora on that digital gender gap. And maybe just to say, I was in New York for the General Assembly, and I heard in many different fora, people were quoting Madeleine Albright. And they kept using that quote about if the UN didn't exist, we would have to invent it. And I think you can certainly apply that here to the IGF. If the IGF didn't exist, we would have to create it. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have some remarks from the floor. So I would ask to Mr. Stefan Knorr, State Secretary, Federal Ministry for Digital and Transport, Germany, to take the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much, dear Mrs. Kafanga, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear IGF family. It's indeed a great pleasure for me to address this very important panel. And the good thing is, everything what I have heard before, I can fully support. And this is, I think, very, very important. And Doreen just said, if we do not have an IGF, we have to develop it, and indeed, we have the IGF. And as we approach the WSIS +20, I think it's time to recall the WSIS 20 years ago as a landmark event. As a landmark event where, for the first time, participants from different sectors, from the private sector, from academia, from the technical sector, and from the fourth was, I just forgot it, but you know it, come together and work together with 175 representatives from different nations on the internet governance. And I think this approach, it was the born of the multi-stakeholder approach, and this approach has indeed proven it worth. And we have to continue to work in this direction. And I can say and I can underline that the German government will support the multi-stakeholder approach also in the future. And we want to do everything that this approach is our approach for the future. We have indeed a lot of new challenges. In 2019, we had the privilege to hold the IGF in Berlin with over 5,000 participants. And we discussed in a very intensive way all the challenges that the internet has become in the past. And that we have indeed new challenges. Some was mentioned, artificial intelligence, for example, social media. We discuss about hate speech. We discuss about disinformation. Yes, we have new challenges, but the only possibility to handle these challenges and to find solutions can only be the multi-stakeholder approach, because we are all relevant in the internet. We all need the internet. All the different areas need the internet, and therefore, when we discuss new solutions, we have to discuss these solutions within the multi-stakeholder approach. To address the new challenges, we also fully support the Global Digital Compact by the UN. I think this could be a good possibility to see what are new challenges that we have to solve in the future. For us, it is important that we do not have parallel structures in the future. We have the IGF, and we do not need something else like the IGF. As I mentioned before, the IGF has proven its worth, and therefore we think that we have to continue working in the IGF, but we have to make the IGF, we have to strengthen the IGF to address all the challenges that we have in the future. So again, thank you very much for this very important panel here, and I hope that in the next days, the result of our discussions here could only be, yes, we support multi-stakeholder, and we want to continue this multi-stakeholder approach also in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Schnorr. And now Mr. Pierce O'Donoghue, Director for the Future Networks.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the panel for those excellent interventions. And just as we look at the achievements in the past, we see the remarkable progress that has been made in harnessing the power of the internet and information and communication technologies. And that collaborative spirit that initiated the process from 2003 has seen stakeholders come together to bridge the digital divide, provide online freedoms, and leverage technology for social and economic development. And so the multi-stakeholder model, which has been at the center of the process, really is something that the EU has been a strong advocate for. And it has been critical to the development and addressing the challenges that we have seen. The fact is that while there have been great advances, we're still faced with problems of connectivity, digital inclusion, and technology for sustainable development. So, as well as the technology challenges, such as AI, as we've heard of, but many others, some of the fundamental problems aren't necessarily just labeled with a technological name. And as we continue with the process, we have to allow the model that has been put in place to adapt. You've seen already with Mr. Schnorr, representative of Germany, that there is great unity in the European Union, for example. So that in a world that knows no borders, we really need to have a united front. And so talking about the multi-stakeholder model, and again, a strong sense of unity by all those who are speaking here, we have to ensure that the dynamic system for involving all stakeholders in the running of the internet is preserved. That can only happen if the model itself is allowed to evolve and adapt to the changing technology problems, but also to address what are some of the global challenges that the GDC is seeking to address. So WSIS symbolizes our shared commitment to that, and the WSIS Plus 20 process allows us an opportunity for improvement, for more inclusive and even more effective multi-stakeholder involvement. And that includes the issue of gender equality, for example, and other non-discriminations as referred to. In fact, really mapping the multi-stakeholder model against the SDGs, which the multi-stakeholder model can actually provide a ready-made formula to address in a way that a purely governmental approach will certainly not be able to do so. So that is why during WSIS Plus 20, the European Commission, the European Union will be working with the multi-stakeholder community and the other institutions to improve the model in operational terms, to adapt to and to address the new challenges of rapidly developing technology. So if there is consensus here today, then let's all of us here work together in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Antonio Pedro, Acting Executive Secretary, UN Economic Commission for Africa. It's a video, so it can start.
Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor to join you in this pivotal discussion and lend a voice on the critical challenges facing the World Summit on the Information Society process. The WSIS Plus 20 review presents an opportunity to reevaluate and reinvigorate the aim of a people-centered and multi-stakeholder approach to global digital transformation. As we come together to improve the working and impact of WSIS and salvage the SDGs, we must first and foremost acknowledge that we live in a world of digital divides, the global north and the global south. Let me highlight three concerns that Africa grapples with that must be addressed in the remaining of the WSIS process. First, I wish to raise the issue of digital infrastructure divides. Africa remains the least connected continent with only 40% of its population online compared to 89% in Europe. Gender and rural-urban divides persist. Lack of competition in the telecom sector results in exorbitant internet costs. Smartphones are prohibitively expensive for many, with costs exceeding 40% of the average monthly income. Moreover, African users pay over 3 times the global average for mobile data. Second, we need to acknowledge the existing policy divides in governing new technologies. New digital innovations like artificial intelligence, blockchain, and autonomous systems offer shared prosperity, but are predominantly controlled by non-African entities. Furthermore, these technologies lack adequate regulatory frameworks, and governments often lack the resources to support safe and equitable digital transformation. Lastly, we face a talent and capacity divide. Talent development is crucial for Africa's technological advancement, yet only 20% of African schools have internet access. Additionally, access to higher education is significantly limited, with African children having only a 6 to 8% chance of going to college, compared to 80% in more developed countries. With Africa's youth population projected to reach 42% of the world's youth by 2030, addressing this digital divide is urgent. To create an inclusive digital future, several steps are imperative. We must foster competition and digital literacy. We must implement policies and frameworks that promote competition, attract ICT infrastructure investments, enhance digital literacy and skills, and empower marginalized communities to leverage ICT resources. In addition, we need to harmonize global and regional regulations. We must dismantle connectivity barriers by harmonizing global and regional regulations, focusing on areas like taxation, consumer protection, cybersecurity, and data standards. Collaboration has seen in initiatives like Africa's single digital market under the African Union is key to overcoming siloed approaches. Third, we have to champion local content and services as a means of inclusivity. It is important that we encourage development of locally relevant applications, services, and content, aligning with WSIS principles. Lastly, WSIS Plus 20 offers a pivotal moment to reshape an inclusive digital future founded on strengthened stakeholder engagement and coordination. This is in line with Secretary General's proposal for a Digital Global Compact. By coming together, we can build a more equitable digital landscape for Africa and the world. I wish you a fruitful discussions and look forward to receiving the outcomes of your deliberation. Thank you.
Thank you. So we heard Mr. Pedro asking for local relevant application according to WSIS principles. And I ask you the last remark, 2 minutes, as final message. Mr. Dream.
I would say I think multi-stakeholderism is key. Driving forward inclusive consultative processes are fundamental. And of course, our goal is to leave no one behind, which for us means leave no one offline. And perhaps just picking up, Pierce, on your points about the SDGs, those interlinkages, sometimes we think of the WSIS as sort of the foundation for the SDGs, and we've just launched something, a report that demonstrates if you leverage digital technologies, you can actually accelerate progress on almost all SDG targets. And so those interlinkages should not be overlooked, and it just means we have a lot of work to do, and we can do it, and I think it will provide much hope for achieving the SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir John Whittingdale.
Thank you. So I wasn't present in 2003 at the first WSIS formation. However, I was at the UN in New York in 2015 when I was able to speak on behalf of the UK then, and I'm pleased to say that remarks I made then still, I think, hold true today. In particular, we see the IGF as being the right forum to be maintained as an open and inclusive process at the heart of the development of internet governance. And I agree with my German colleague that we need to focus on the IGF for that purpose and not allow it to be duplicated elsewhere. But also, I welcomed then the recognition of the importance of human rights and fundamental freedoms at the heart of all aspects of development of the internet, including the governance structure. And I think that also remains as true today, particularly as we confront some of the challenges that we've been discussing, like artificial intelligence, like cybersecurity, like cybercrime, like disinformation, like hate speech. Human rights and fundamental freedoms are of paramount importance, and it remains the case that we must respect them equally online as much as we do offline.
Thank you. Mr. Yu Murai.
Okay, thank you. The infrastructure technology of the internet has been changed a lot and is still changing. And it's started from the terrestrial infrastructure and going on to the space infrastructure, which is like a low Earth orbit and everything to provide the internet on the surface of the planet. But now we started to discuss about how the internet can connect the moon and Mars type of thing as well. And so infrastructure technology evolved very rapidly. And also the application technology, like the social media, the cloud services and the smart cities and artificial intelligence today. It's going to be, also providing a very, very strong and evolving impact to the society. Therefore, the IGF and the WSIS process to open up for the newly coming, the stakeholder, inviting them, and then providing the open discussion place is going to be very, very important.
Thank you, Ms. Tripti Sinha.
Thank you. I would say today's discussion illustrates a pivotal truth. The multi-stakeholder model is crucial for sculpting our inclusive digital future and for bridging the digital divide and empowering the entire world. ICANN is part of this collaborative multi-stakeholder governance models in coordinating one aspect of the internet, the underpinnings of the technical infrastructure of the internet. And we are amongst the strongest supporters of the IGF. I would say going forward, let's ensure that we preserve principles, and I would say those principles are inclusion, and to ensure that the internet is used as an agency for change, for good, for empowerment and equity and access. I would also like to say that as the global community reconvenes in WSIS +20, let us reaffirm the wisdom and decisions of the past, which have proven to be very successful in these last 20 years. And we must uphold this model because it is adaptable, it is inclusive, and it's a very effective approach to internet governance. And so as we navigate the future in our collective conversations today, and our endeavors must see a vision of the internet that symbolizes this equity and equality and inclusivity and empowerment. And as a technologist, I would like to leave you with one note. We've talked a lot about AI, but our digital experience, we talked about how it changed in the last 20 years. It is about to get even more fun in the next 20 years. We haven't even begun to realize how AI is going to impact us. It will change our world. And there's another technology that we haven't talked about, which is quantum technologies, quantum computers, quantum sensors, and the quantum internet. It is yet another change that will impact us quite soon. It's on the precipice, on the brink of innovation. And all these innovations have been brought about by an open internet. So it's served as an innovation platform. Let's ensure that we protect this. And as Dr. Murai just said, let's not ignore space, because there's some exciting stuff going on there as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Maria Fernanda Garza.
An interoperable ICT ecosystem is crucial to offer truly meaningful connectivity that also includes access to services and relevant content available in local languages and the skills and capability to transform information into actionable knowledge. Governments alone cannot meet the investment needed to implement these challenges of expanding meaningful connectivity. So the private sector has been a pioneer and a partner in bridging this gap from the beginning, and to continue and upscale business investments and enable policy environment is fundamental. And this for the IGF, it is the right place to create this framework. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sigbjørn Gjelsbyr.
Well, thank you so much. And WSIS +20 is an opportunity to reflect on the digital area's achievements, challenges, and evolving needs. It's a moment to re-evaluate and set new goals for a more inclusive and equitable digital future. While Norway endorses existing structures, we acknowledge the need for continuous improvement and dialogue to address our concerns. The challenges and opportunities before us are more complex and far-reaching than ever before. To navigate this uncharted terrain, we must accelerate the multi-stakeholder process. This means embracing inclusivity in its truest form. We must extend our invitation to those voices yet to be heard, such as startup with bold ideas, the youth who are digital natives, the local leaders who understand the unique needs of their communities, and the experts in different fields. Together, they will guide us toward the internet we want. Moreover, we must renew our commitment to ethics and accountability. As AI and other technologies reshape our society, we must ensure that our multi-stakeholder collaboration uphold the highest ethical standards, safeguarding the human rights, privacy, and security. As we envision WSIS beyond 2025, we must anticipate emerging technologies and prioritize sustainability. Let us commit to reducing the environmental footprint of our digital endeavors, working towards a greener, more responsible digital future. The IGF role in WSIS Plus 20 and beyond is to facilitate open, inclusive, and informed discussions on the internet governance challenges and opportunities. Norway wishes to contribute to keeping and developing the IGF as a vital and inclusive format and a meeting place for all stakeholders. That is why Norway, earlier this year, announced our bid to host the IGF in 2025. And thank you.
Thank you. Graciela Milo.
That's good to hear. And I guess only two things for myself. The robust, if the multi-stakeholder engagement for WSIS Plus 20 is to be robust, I think, and so that it matches the energy and hope generated 20 years ago, we do need meaningful engagement. We in civil society are ready. We are willing, but this willingness, it's not only about willingness, but it needs to be backed up with support. And I do think that this multi-stakeholder engagement, so to be able to really, for the review specifically, it needs political will and accompanying resources. There are many different, as we all know, there are many different governance structures and processes happening. It's very difficult to follow all of these. So our expectation as well is that these different processes connect with each other. It's really important. It's not a zero-sum game. There is space for different processes, but they need to be connected. We need to make real sense of them. I think Doreen was saying specifically the action lines connect to the SDGs. The Global Digital Compact and the Summit of the Future need to connect to what is being discussed here. Otherwise, there's a fear of fragmentation of governance. And I think that's not what we want. What we want is connected internet governance, digital governance, where we can then meaningfully engage. And again, I would like to say that it does need political will and it does need to be backed up with resources. Thank you.
Thank you to all our panelists. So we heard that WSIS anticipates a lot of, with his multi-stakeholder approach, anticipate a lot of what we have seen become the problems of the internet world and the internet governance. And if the shift was from thinking humans and other entities